everybody. And me and Sarah have sort of been going back in time a bit, haven't we, with Doctor Who lately?
Nothing to do with Doctor Who at first.
Yes.
We were talking about the film Wicked. And Charlotte told me this fact that absolutely blew my mind. So, Charlotte, please tell all.
Wicked was a movie that I was really excited for actually last year because I grew up with Disney, sort of old school Disney musicals, and I knew the Wicked theatre production. I've never seen it, but I adored the soundtrack and I knew the basic beats of it. So I watched the movie and like halfway through, do you know when you feel like you know an actor, but you can't quite place where from? And it was Fiero's character in the movie. And then afterwards it hit me. I was like, I know that actor from Doctor Who. And it was a good amount of years ago, and it was Jonathan Bailey. He was quite young. Now
Very
he's a little
young.
bit older.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it was the same person. Or like, I mean, once you see it, you can tell. But I was kind of like, what? You in Doctor Who? How did I, not figure this out before? How did I not see it? Especially a Capaldi episode.
Yeah, especially when I told you. I was like, it's a Capaldi one, so you probably will remember as soon as I start to give you hints.
Yeah, and I didn't at all. I hang my head in shame. You got one over me, Charlotte. I was completely flabbergasted. But then that got us thinking. Actually, I quite enjoyed Time Ice.
Yeah, because I feel like because of the nature of Modern Who, especially when it's like a one-off episode, it's not a two-parter, it's not a finale, it's not an opener. These sort of middle of the series episodes sort of get lost, don't they? Like you said, people forget.
People do, and I remember enjoying Time Iced on broadcast, just because it's such a self-contained story. But and I watched it earlier this week, and I think it's a really strong episode, and I just can't believe that more people aren't talking about it. I think it's a brilliant showcase for Peter Capaldi. At this point, he's got a handle on his Doctor, and I think the main forecast, fantastic.
Yeah, I think this episode had so much going for it because it takes that idea of the heist movie, of the sort of all the stereotypes and all the sort of things we're used to seeing completely, I would say, outside of Who usually. And you take that format and you make it a Doctor Who story. And I think Moffat was very good at this at times in his run of clearly either taking inspiration from something else or sort of homaging it. This is more of a direct, clear what it's sort of going back to.
It's definitely based on Ocean's 11 and them kind of.
Yeah, and like Hustle in back, because that was a thing on BBC for quite a lot of years, wasn't it? Hustle. So I think some of the direction makes me think of that show a lot, actually, in this, watching it back now.
Yeah, I would imagine that was probably deliberate choices by Douglas McKinnon, because he was director of that one. I do know two facts about this story. One, it was Stephen Moffat's concept, and he had it for a long time. I know it's not just written by him; it's written by Stephen Thompson.
Yes, it was two-handed this.
And I also know that this script was written before Capaldi was cast. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah,
because I can't imagine anybody else but the 12th Doctor now.
At this point in Series 8, they were doing a lot of exploring of his character as a Doctor, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll happily admit this, at the time, I wasn't quite happy with some of the ways they were writing his Doctor.
Yeah, I wasn't. To me, it felt like Colin Baker all over again, especially with that the toxic relationship with Clara, and it was pretty harsh. I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as Sixth Doctor and Perry, but
it was such a stark difference when it came to how he treated death and how he could get somebody killed, like a second character or a secondary character, and then not bat an eyelid about it. Whereas for me, the Doctor is always been he understands sometimes people have to die maybe and get hurt, but he's sort of, he acknowledges that and is quite sort of sorry about it.
Because he's saying basically there is a time to grieve, but not now. We've got to keep focused on the job in hand. We'll focus on that after. And there was little glimpses where he generally does look sad when Saber
Yes.
uses the shredder. So that, yeah, there are little glimpses there, but yeah, it is so far removed from from especially me and you,
Yes.
coming to it from the modern era.
People who had that classic background would probably understand a lot more what they were doing with Capaldi and sort of recognise what they were doing, whereas people like me and you, who our only doctors were Chris, David and Matt, it felt out of place because we didn't have that classic context. And I think now, both me and you have watched a lot more classic than we did when Time Heist was on. I like how they do explore his morals in this story. And it directly sort of addresses his manner and the way he speaks to people and the way he treats people, I think, more importantly. And actually, Jonathan Bailey's character is a big part of that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, he's the one who gets the most pushback from the Doctor. And, you know, he gives him a hard time, even more so than Clara. In fact, in this, I mean, Clara is quite, I don't want to say passive because she isn't, but at this point she's accepted the Doctor, this incarnation of the Doctor. She's used to it to the point where she doesn't even know that she's excusing his actions until she's pulled up several times by Sai. And yeah, again, you know, this is a relatively new actor at this point. He's very young. To just even be able to be remembered in a scene with somebody like Peter Capaldi, I was just really impressed with, you know, how much presence Jonathan actually has, because it gets really hostile, and and you can tell he's making the Doctor really think, and I just love their interactions.
Yeah, I think you needed somebody at this point in Capaldi's run to sort of be that hothead, to sort of, like you said, because Clara wasn't challenging him. She had this point sort of settled, I would argue, that's the word I would use, of, right, this is how he is now. But it took somebody like Sai, and to a degree, Saber, but I think Sai's the more character it's more effectively done with because of the writing and Jonathan's acting. It took somebody with his sort of force of personality to make the Doctor think a little bit. And Clara, when Saber's just been killed or we think she's dead, and Clara sort of has an excuse on the ready almost, doesn't she? And Sai has that line of, I can tell you've been around him too much because you're apologising.
Yeah.
And it's such like a short little line. And you can see Clara sort of visibly steps back, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. Capaldi's just phenomenal with his, you know, think about what you want most in the world and how much you want it. What would you do? And yeah, again, his presence, you know, when Sai says to him, well, who made you the leader?
Yeah.
Like, really is, because he has got that presence. He's just come in, room full of strangers. Yeah, I'm in charge. I'm going to do this. Something which later incarnations do not possess that quality. But I'm really struck how easy Capaldi got that. And I don't even think it's an age thing, because if you look at Matt Smith had it. So it's not, you know, impossible for a younger actor to do. I do think Jonathan Bailey has got it. Maybe he should have been a doctor.
Oh, right now he's my dream pick. I'll happily admit that
it's
right
too
now.
late now because Hollywood's already claimed him.
I know. but it's like, but that's the thing with Capaldi in this one. I think he also is a good showcase for him, because you sort of see him being they're all confused, and it does that typical Moffat thing of sort of starting you at the end of the story and you have to trace your way back. And like, because of that, you see the Doctor be a little bit out of his element here and having to sort of adjust. And Capaldi plays that quite brilliantly. And then when you get near the end with sort of him working it all out, you really buy that. And I think that's the clue for for most people at that point as who the architect is because of Capaldi's acting. It's like, who would the Doctor hate that much?
Yeah, absolutely. Although it's a really awful voice when you see that clip at the end.
Yeah.
And he's messing about trying to, like, you could have done a better job than that, Doctor.
I think this is one of those stories that if you really looked at it, you could see all the sort of working parts.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the characters, because of the dialogue, because of the style that it's presented at, you sort of forget about that and you just enjoy the story, don't you? And the mystery.
It's quite fast paced. So there's always something. So I don't honestly, you haven't got time to really scrutinise it. But I think it mostly holds up.
Throughout the whole thing, you sort of led with what Sai and Saber want out of this, and you, like you said, they're quite tragic. What they're missing, what they're sort of searching for. With Sai, you've got the idea of his memories, and I think what also I love about that is it's fully using the fact that we've got this cyborg type character. We've got somebody who could just wipe his memories if he wanted to, but it touches upon the sort of the human element of that. Of he's forgotten everybody he loves, and he's had to do that. I mean, that scene when you referred to when he was dying, or he thought he was, and he says to Clara, "What do you see before you're about to die? You see your friends, you see your family. I see nothing." And you really get that impact of that's hurting him. That's really getting at him, and so that's his tragedy.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful when you really sit down and think about it. It is really tragic. Moffat's really good at this. There's always this kind of melancholy about him, like in Last Christmas, where he's, every Christmas is last Christmas for somebody. And you really sit and you're like, well, yeah, it is actually. Like, no, don't make me think like that, Stephen.
Well, yeah, and then you've got Saber, who sort of got this other tragic fate, and she has another lovely line of she can't touch anybody because she turns into them, and she says to the Doctor, "Would you like to look at yourself in the eye?" Like that idea of could you physically look at yourself? And I think that's on purpose, that theme, because of Capaldi's Doctor. That's why I agree with you. Maybe the bare bones he had for a while, but I feel like this is very suited to Capaldi's Doctor because so many of the themes sort of talk about identity and who are you and what makes us who we are and how we value things like friends and family and memories and those sort of themes.
It's really cleverly done, and because the entire theme, isn't it, of Series 8, it's not just, the mystery of Missy, it's, am I a good man? That's the thing that runs through everything, which is why I think he seems to befriend Saber much more easily than does with Sai, because they've got that connection, because of course he understands and he sympathizes, but I also like she's got the measure of him because of her ability when he asks her, how did you know I was lying? She said, because I've been so many faces, I'm good at reading them. So she's not falling for any of his tricks. But it's just fascinating watching the dynamic between, because I think up until this point, Saber's the only real other person who he's kind of bonded with, because if you look back into the Dalek, he just wasn't interested in Journey Blue or anybody, even when she changed and wanted to join the TARDIS at the end. She was like, no, you're not coming. He's very seems to be hostile with anyone except Clara. So I thought that's a real important point at this point, because I think, and then there isn't really anybody else until oh gosh, what's he called? Frank Skinner character.
Oh, I forgot the character's name. I know, I forgot what he's called, but he definitely bonds a bit with that character.
Yeah, so there's these major gaps where it is just, no, I'm just happy with Clara, that's all I want to know.
Yes.
Uh,
So it feels like this episode was like a little bit of them not softening him, but sort of showing that he's not completely lost that sort of ability to connect with people. I think it's almost just this doctor does it differently, and it's sort of showing how he does it differently.
yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's just that thing, isn't it, of reminding us this character is an alien. He's not this, he looks humanoid, but he's not.
It was nice just to go back to sort of, like you said, a small crew of characters again.
Mhm.
Because I feel like sometimes New Who, especially because of the more time restraint, when they overpopulate a story with characters, it suffers. That you don't really connect or care, or they feel a bit weak. Whereas here, because it's so focused on the two secondary characters of Cyber and Psy, and probably the governor. The governor is probably a little bit there, but she isn't given a lot of time technically on the screen.
Yeah, I could say, I suppose if there's any criticism of this story, is the villain of the piece. She wasn't in it much, but then again, we knew everything we needed to know.
Yeah.
We know more about the clone
Yes.
than the actual Madame Carabraxos, which is a little bit of a shame.
But a bit of me thinks, though, I can see both sides to that. Because I think now and again it's nice just to have a villain that's despicable and just utterly hateful in the way that there's no redeeming qualities, really.
Yeah, she's proper psycho. There's some brilliant, like, when he says, what does he say? Like, don't lecture me, you self-burner.
Yeah, and then also the Capaldi line, which I quite like. And that's another thing which actually you forget there's some good comedy bits here with Capaldi's Doctor. Like, it's actually showing his wittiness and like his comedy chops, Capaldi, when he sort of says to her, "Oh, you'd be a career break for the right therapist," and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, but the Saki humour worked for him. What he finds difficult to do is like the physical comedy.
Yes.
When he tries to do that, and he guilty of this in Deep Breath with that transition of Matt could do goofy.
Yeah,
Physical
slapstick,
comedy,
like it felt like, wasn't it?
Capaldi can't really. It doesn't feel natural. But this, but again, there's so many one-liners. When Sai says, "Oh, put you in charge," basically it's the eyebrows. It's just this flippant comment, and he just carries on doing what he's doing. It is, I think, if you haven't watched Time Heist for a while, go and check it out, because there'll be so much that you've missed or forgotten about.
Oh yeah, it's Moffat was so good at when he was like in his element of scaring kids in the right way with his monsters or concepts. I mean, it's like when they go lower down, and the fact that they've like kept these people in prison cells, and like so when Sai and Saber both sort of look at it and go, whatever happens, do not let me become like that. You can buy completely. They're like, that's a fate worse than death.
And the idea that you can't think, and it's impossible to do. You can't, you can't not think about something because you automatically want to, and it's just, again, we're going back to don't blink, hold your breath, and like he's rapidly running out of senses, isn't he? Things to do. We went to the Symphonic Spectacular, which was like the Proms concert, and they included some music of Series 8, and they got the monsters and stuff, and they got the teller, somebody in the costume, and it's big, imposing, and it walked round the aisles, and all kids are like, ah. And it's really, and I love it, because I love that it's a prosthetic, because I'm getting so fed up of just CG. But and I think that's probably why we probably like it so much. It was a simple story
Yes.
of a proper decent monster. Isn't it lovely to have men in particular,
Yes.
being heroes? Because this was still the time before all that changed and men couldn't be heroic.
Well, yeah, like you've got that moment with Sai, where sort of Saber didn't. When she died, it wasn't a heroic death; it was more of a tragic one. That sort of seemed back to tragedy with her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Sai, he did it to save Clara. Like he purposefully made himself a target, and I once again using the fact that he's an android, he's cyborg, to have all the criminals in history in his head. So then it was like he was definitely going to get targeted then. And yeah, it's nice just to see those characters sort of make those sacrifices. Because like I said, he'd had like 2 scenes with Clara, probably just the 2 of them when it wasn't group stuff. So the fact that he was willing to do that says a lot for the character.
It does. It speaks volumes, and it was believable. This is the thing, because Saber, if she'd have been written now, would have been, the bestest ever. And you could see how Sai's character could have been really diminished, and the Doctor's to some extent. But that didn't happen because we were before this time where the writing started to change. I don't suppose I'd really picked up on it at the time. I just watched it. But
all the characters here felt like they needed to be here, and they were rounded.
Yes, it felt like a satisfactory ending because it was a very Moffat-y ending.
Oh yeah,
where the Doctor's figuring it out on the spot, and then you're jumping about. But I never felt like it was rushed. It felt like a proper ending. I think the only real criticism I've got, and again, and it's the final line, and I think we've mentioned this before when we've spoken about Clara, is the Doctor saying, "Oh, beat that for a day."
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much I hate that sort of love triangle thing they were doing with Clara, Danny, and the Doctor. One, I never understood it anyway because Moffat had said there was going to be no hanky-panky in the TARDIS. He went to great lengths.
In deep breath, yeah.
Yeah. Practically beat your head around with it. And we got it again a little bit at the beginning where she's getting ready for the day and the Doctor just don't get it. Okay, I like that. That was played for laughs. I thought that was funny. But then to suddenly have it undone, I mean, obviously it gets worse in the next episode.
Yeah.
In the caretaker. But I was just like, no, we didn't need that. You could have just had don't rob any banks without me.
Yeah, I think it's sort of it's the only bit of this story which feels unwelcome. Everything else slots in really nicely.
Yeah.
And I think my sort of finishing thoughts is actually I think a lot of the fans probably would have a lot of fun going back to some of these episodes, like A Time Heist, that you've probably not watched in a while, or maybe you had issues with that series in particular at the time, so maybe you didn't sort of be able to watch it fully, and just see what you feel. I had a lot of fun going back, basically, to watch this. I don't know how you felt going back.
Oh
to watch
yeah, I
it
did.
after.
I really enjoyed it. I remember enjoying it on first view. I remember that being a standout one. But yeah, I don't think I anticipated how much I enjoyed it back. Because now I want to watch more Capaldi, and I'm kind of thinking, God, we didn't know how good we had it, did we?
God, yeah. After you guys watch this, in the comments, actually, it'd be interested to see what people think, whether they've gone back to watch this afterwards or just their general thoughts, because I think sort of revisiting Modern Who, you find a lot, and I'm going to be interested what other people think if this sort of inspires people to watch it again.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, very curious. Yeah, I would love to know what you thought at the time, what you think now. Has it changed? Have we influenced you? Have we got it right about Capaldi? That we had a good thing, and we took him for granted. You know, are we too hard on our sex, or do you think we're right about the fangirls? Please let us know. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this and you want to see more ramblings of us too, we were having this conversation anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, we will see you very soon, and enjoy.